Welcome back to our North Adams version of the Northern Berkshire Adult Education course, ABE, Language Arts, Reading and Writing for Adults. I want to give you a short commercial before we start. We have started our classes, and you know about this one that is on this television show, but we also are having our remote classes where lessons are uploaded to our Canvas teacher site. And those of you who are enrolled, I want you to remember that there are Zoom meetings every morning at 10 o'clock. If you're one of our students, we've sent you the invite. You link on that, and then we meet together on our computers or cell phones. So make sure that you check in, and we'll have some tips on how to use Zoom, how to use Canvas, and we'll get started with our fall classes. So on the whiteboard, if you could zoom in, this is where we are now, and we are at Drury High School. When you come to our site, I want you to realize that you come through the door right near to the cafeteria in this part of Drury. Don't go to the office. We have our own space, and our door is right there. And with the COVID regulations, we ask you that you call ahead. The number for our program is 662-5386, and we'll be glad to make sure that we're there when you'd like to come. So that's where the new NBAE offices are, at the Drury High School site, and that's our entrance right there. So yeah, glad to see you all. So my name is Linda Neville, and I am your instructor for this series. Last week I was trying to answer the question of where words came from. So we walked it through the idea that gestures were the first way that humans communicated. And then gestures turned into drawings and sounds. And then we end up where humans have decided that we need words. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the formation of words, which come from letters, and that every letter has a sound. Last week I also brought in some of my favorite books, so I just would like to start with introducing to you two books on this series, and maybe if you're interested in certain kinds, you'll be interested in reading some of the books or the short stories by certain authors. So before we start that, I'm going to give you a word of the day, and I've put the scrambled letters up on my whiteboard. So the letters, I'll say them for you, are S, E, L, A, L, B, L, Y, S. So this is a word that actually means, it's something you should know about all words, that words are divided into 6 types of these. So that's my first clue for the scrambled word of the day. So now I'd like to introduce you to a man who is a science fiction author. And I don't know about you, but I've always liked to play my Xbox, and I've also loved the idea of science fiction writing. And this man is Isaac Asimov. He's kind of the father of science fiction as far as I'm concerned. And the story I'm going to read today, it's a short story by him, and it's called The Fun They Had. He wrote this story in 1951, and it was for a syndicated newspaper where he lived. And then it was later published in a very famous science fiction magazine called Fantasy and Science Fiction, which still is published today. He was from Russia and came to the United States. He died in 1992, and I believe it was January 2nd of 2020 was his 100th birthday. So there's going to be a lot, you're going to be seeing a lot more on television and in movies, and they've brought up a lot of his books. He wrote about 500 books. He was a scientist. He also came up with the 3 laws of robotics, and they're kind of interesting, and I have to show you the book that he wrote. And some of you may have seen some of his movies, but this book, I, Robot, starred Will Smith, and you might have seen that and enjoyed that book. But in this book and in the movie, he came up with his 3 rules of robotics. And these were the 3 rules. A robot may not injure a human being, or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Number 2, a robot must obey orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. So you could not order your robot to kill you, put you out of your misery, because a robot can't disobey the first rule. The 3rd rule is that a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. And they seem kind of silly in a way now when I think about it, but these are rules that he made in 1951, and he gave a lot of thought to the idea of what would our future be like, because at that time there were a lot of things happening technology-wise, and the idea of robots and the idea of the future where we would get robots to work for us, and the idea later on, can robots talk, can robots think, and the whole artificial intelligence thing became quite an area of interest to a lot of different people. So let me just first of all read this story to you. It's a short story, and no, it's not about robots, it's actually about a book. So I want you to think about what I'm saying and think about what you hear, because a short story gives you sort of a few things you're not aware of until you really concentrate on what's being said. So, and then I'll ask you a few questions after I read it. The Fun They Had by Isaac Asimov. Margie even wrote about it that night in her diary. On the page headed May 17th, 2157, she wrote, "Today, Tommy found a real," I think he called it a book. It was a very old book. Margie's grandfather once said that when he was a little boy, his grandfather told him that there was a time when all stories were printed on paper. They turned the pages, which were yellow and crinkly, and it was awfully funny to read words that stood still instead of moving the way they were supposed to on a screen, you know. And then, when they turned back to the page before, it had the same words on it that it had had when they read it the first time. "Gee," said Tommy, "what a waste. When you're through with the book, you would just throw it away, I guess." "Our television screen must have had 1,000,000 books on it, and it's good for plenty more. I wouldn't throw it away." "Same with mine," said Margie. She was 11 and hadn't seen as many telebooks as Tommy had. He was 13. She said, "Where'd you find it?" "In my house." He pointed without looking because he was busy reading. "It was in the attic." "What's it about?" "School." Margie was scornful. "School? What's there to write about school? I hate school." Margie always hated school, but now she hated it more than ever. The mechanical teacher had been giving her test after test in geography, and she had been doing worse and worse, until her mother had shaken her head sorrowfully and sent for the country inspector. He was a round little man with a red face and a whole box of tools with dials and wires. He smiled at Margie and gave her an apple, then took the teacher apart. Margie had hoped he wouldn't know how to put it together again, but he knew how all right, and after an hour or so, there it was again, large and black and ugly, with a big screen on which all the lessons were shown and the questions were asked. That wasn't so bad. The part Margie hated most was the slot where she had to put homework and test papers. She always had to write them out in a punch code that made her learn when she was 6 years old, and the mechanical teacher calculated the mark in no time. The inspector had smiled after he was finished and patted Margie's head. He said to her mother, "It's not the little girl's fault, Mrs. Jones. I think the geography sector was geared a little too quick. Those things happen sometimes. I've slowed it up to an average 10-year level. Actually, the overall pattern of her progress is quite satisfactory." And he patted Margie's head again. Margie was disappointed. She had been hoping they would take the teacher away altogether. They had once taken Tommy's teacher away for nearly a month because the history sector had blanked out completely. So she said to Tommy, "Why would anyone write about school?" Tommy looked up at her with very superior eyes. "Because it's not our kind of school, stupid. This is the old kind of school that they had hundreds and hundreds of years ago," he added loftily, pronouncing the word carefully, "centuries ago." Margie was hurt. "Well, I don't know what kind of school they had all that time ago." She read the book over his shoulder for a while, then said, "Anyway, they had a teacher." "Sure they had a teacher, but it wasn't a regular teacher. It was a man." "A man? How could a man be a teacher?" "Well, he just told the boys and girls things and gave them homework and asked them questions." "A man isn't smart enough," said Margie. "Sure he is. My father knows as much as any teacher." "He can't. A man can't know as much as a teacher." "He knows almost as much, I betcha." Margie wasn't prepared to dispute that. She said, "I wouldn't want a strange man in my house to teach me." Tommy screamed with laughter. "You don't know how much, Margie. The teachers didn't live in the house. They had a special building and all the kids went there. And all the kids learned the same thing? Sure, if they were the same age. But my mother says a teacher has to be adjusted to fit the mind of each boy and girl it teaches, and that each kid has to be taught differently. Just the same, they didn't do it that way then. If you don't like it, you don't have to read the book." "I didn't say I didn't like it," Margie said quickly. She wanted to read about those funny schools. They weren't even half finished when Margie's mother called, "Margie, school." Margie looked up. "Not yet, Mama." "Now," said Mrs. Jones, "and it's probably time for Tommy too." Margie said to Tommy, "Can I read the book some more with you after school?" "Maybe," he said nonchalantly. He walked away whistling, the dusty old book tucked up beneath his arm. Margie went into the schoolroom. It was right next to her bedroom, and the mechanical teacher was on and waiting for her. It was always on at the same time every day except Saturday and Sunday, because her mother said little girls learned better if they learned at regular hours. The screen was lit up and it said, "Today's arithmetic lesson is on the addition of proper fractions. Please insert yesterday's homework in the proper slot." Margie did so with a sigh. She was thinking about the old schools they had when her grandfather's grandfather was a little boy. All the kids from the whole neighborhood came, laughing and shouting in the schoolyard, sitting together in the schoolroom, going home together at the end of the day. They learned the same things so that they could help each other with their homework and talk about it. And the teachers were people. The mechanical teacher was flashing on the screen. When we add the fractions 1/2 and 1/4, Margie was thinking about how the kids must have loved it in the old days. She was thinking about the fun they had. So there's a really interesting short story from Isaac Asimov. Very simple plot, written in 1951, and he's thinking about the good old days, but he's writing about a time period ahead in the future. So when we read something like this, it's very interesting to note that this kind of a story it's what we call a fiction. It's a story, it's made up, it has a setting, it has a plot, it has characters. And so here's a few questions that I'd like to just put to you. And if you have your notebooks, I'd like you to just write the questions down for later thought. When you read a story, you should always be thinking about these questions. So what did you notice in the writing? For instance, what year is this happening? Is it during our time period? If it isn't, how do we know what time period it is? Another thing that comes to mind is that Margie doesn't quite know what a book is because of the way she describes what she thinks about telebooks. She's not even sure about telebooks because Tommy has more telebooks than she has. But so it is something that was put into the future, and she's calling the teacher her computer, basically. That's her idea of what a teacher is. So if you're reading books, I'd love to hear what you're reading. I'd also like to know if you have any questions about other books that you'd like me to mention, and we can talk about them. I do want to talk a little bit more about the idea of words and the way words are put together. So let me just go over a little, I guess we'd call it phonetics language type lesson here. So again, this is our word up here, and I said there are 6 types of these when we think about how words are put together. So if you haven't thought about what the words are, I'll be doing some things that might help you. So when we talk about our alphabet, we have 26 words in our alphabet. There are consonants, and this, the word is consonant, and I'm going to divide that word for you. Consonants. And these 3 sections are called syllables. And that's the way we can figure out how to pronounce certain words that we're not familiar with. And there are 6 different ways to divide up words, but we'll get to that a little later. There are also consonants in our alphabet. Vowels are the letters A, E, I, O, and U. And with the consonants, that's how we make the words. Let me move those up a little bit so you can see them. So those are the main things we have to work with. 21 consonants, 6 vowels, and 5 vowels, and we get our 26 letters that we can work with. I'm going to show you what this word actually is so that I can go on with our lesson. So the word is syllables, and this is the word, let me pull these up, So there are 6 types of syllables. Am I spelling that right? Yes. All right. So If you have your notebooks, you can write these down, and we'll go into what kinds of syllables there are. Why is this important? If you can divide any word up into its syllables, you'll be able to pronounce it, and then you'll be able to say the word. Once you can say the word, you can find out how to spell it better, and you can also get the meaning of the word. So let me put the different types of syllables up for you. So there are 6 types. There are closed syllables. I think I'll just do 2 today so you can see. There are closed syllables, and the second one is a vowel with a silent E syllable. So a closed syllable could be simply a consonant, H is a consonant, and a vowel, and a consonant. So, those kind of closed syllables, you've got a consonant on one side and a vowel in the middle and a consonant on the other side, and the sounds of those 3 letters are hat, and it's always short. It's always short when there is a consonant that closes in a vowel, and then it has a consonant on the end. It's closed in. The vowel has a consonant on both sides. So that word is hat. If you added a letter combination like this, where you take the H out and put a TH, it's a new word, but it's that. And the A sound still stays short. If I put the H back, the consonant H back, whoops, and I add a silent E on the end, this is the second way you can divide words made from letters. Now that word has completely changed the sound of the A. We don't say hattie, we say hate, because that E on the end goes along with this rule here. If the word has a vowel, consonant, silent E on the end, the vowel sound is long. So that changes the ass sound in hat to the long sound eight, not hat, but 8. And we don't say the E. And that's the two types of syllables that are in the kinds of ways that we make words. So those are two of the syllables. I guess I do have time to do a third one. Let me do a third syllable. Okay, the third type of syllable is called an open syllable, and that makes a long sound. All right, let me get. So with a syllable that has a long sound, you have, let's use our H again. So that's the consonant H, and we put a vowel E, but there's no consonant here. Nothing to close in the E. So it's open, and that makes the vowel E say its own name, or we say it's long. Let me get my marker. The way we show short or long sounds is when something is a long sounding vowel, there's a line over it. So it's he. The vowel says its own name, he. If you change the E to say an I, which is another vowel, it's still long, but instead of he, it's hi. You hear the I sound, and it's long. Going back to, if I put a consonant over here, let's see, what consonant will I use? Maybe him or hit. What do we like? Let's do hip. So if I put a T here, that's the vowel in the middle. It was high because it was open. There was nothing holding it down, nothing stopping it from moving. If we put a consonant over here, we've moved it to be this kind of a syllable. It's closed. So instead of it being a long sound, it becomes a short sound because closed syllables have short sound. Whoops. It looks like a smiley, like a smile. That's a symbol for something being a short sound. So instead of height, it doesn't say height, it says hit. If there was such a word as an E on the end, that would have to be a long sound, and you can even do nonsense words. But if you follow the rule, that E sound would make that vowel long sounding I, which would go with the second type of syllable. So you can see if you learn your types of syllables, you can sound out words. These are one syllable words right now, but they are ways to learn how to spell words, and they're also ways that help us when we're trying to figure out what the word is, what it looks like, how do we pronounce it. And it really does help when you can, it helps you with your spelling, and it also helps you with the pronunciation on these types. So we've got, three types of syllables. So next week we'll learn the other 3 types, and that's the trick. I don't know if you've ever learned these syllable types before, but even when you're working on, actually right over my shoulder, I'm seeing the word Berkshire. Got to move this way. And I'm saying, if you look at the word Berkshire, that's a word that you can, if you listen to how I said it, there's 2 syllables in it. You can sound it, you can divide it into 2 sounds. Berkshire. And it helps sometimes, when I used to teach this before, I used to have people clap. How many sounds are in there? There's a first part, Berkshire. And actually, I'm giving you a tip. There is something called an R-controlled syllable, and that's one for next week. But thank you for joining me this week, and hope to see you next Wednesday. Thank you.